My name was once a whisper of fear in certain circles, a name synonymous with unyielding conviction and a burning zeal that I mistook for divine fire. I was Omar, and my world was sharply defined, a stark landscape of believer and infidel, of righteousness and damnation. From my earliest memories, I was steeped in a rigid interpretation of faith, a doctrine that demanded absolute obedience and offered a glorious paradise as reward for those who walked its narrow, unforgiving path. My teachers, men with eyes that held the certainty of prophets and voices that thundered with divine authority, painted a vivid picture of a world at war, a spiritual battleground where we, the chosen, were called to be soldiers of the one true God. Every verse, every story, every lesson was filtered through this lens of conflict, reinforcing the idea that our purpose was to purify the earth, to stand against the corrupting influences of the unbelievers, and to establish a dominion of absolute truth. I embraced this calling with every fiber of my being. There was a seductive power in such certainty, a comfort in knowing that all of life's complexities could be reduced to a simple binary. My heart swelled with a fierce pride for our community, for our unwavering adherence to what we believed was the only pure path. I saw the perceived decadence and moral decay of the outside world as proof of our superiority, a confirmation that we alone held the keys to salvation. My days were filled with study, with prayer, and with preparations for what I believed was an inevitable confrontation. I learned to handle weapons with the same reverence I once held for sacred texts. I trained my body to endure hardship, my mind to suppress doubt. Doubt, I was taught, was a whisper from the devil, a weakness to be crushed. Compassion for those outside our circle was seen as a betrayal, a contamination of our purity. They were the lost, the misguided, the enemies of God, and our duty was to either convert them or, if they resisted, to remove them as obstacles to the divine plan. This ideology became the very air I breathed, shaping my thoughts, my actions, my identity. I actively participated in activities designed to further our cause, activities that the outside world would undoubtedly label as extremist, as hateful. In my mind, however, they were righteous acts, necessary steps towards a divinely ordained future. I remember the fervor in our gatherings, the passionate speeches that stirred our souls, the shared sense of belonging to something immense, something historic. We were the vanguard, the true warriors, and our reward would be eternal. Yet sometimes, in the dead of night, when the echoes of the day's fervent rhetoric faded, a sliver of something unsettling would pierce my resolve. A fleeting image of a child's innocent face from a news report, a story of kindness from an unexpected quarter, a question that would bubble up unbidden. If our God was truly all-merciful, why did his path seem to require so much harshness, so much exclusion, so much judgment? I would quickly suppress these thoughts, berating myself for my weakness, reinforcing my convictions with memorized verses and the stern warnings of my mentors. The comfort of certainty was too precious to relinquish. The alternative, a world of gray areas and moral ambiguity, was terrifying. So, I clung to the black and white, to the unshakable belief that I was on the side of angels, fighting a holy war. My life was a testament to this conviction, a straight, unwavering line towards a paradise I was certain awaited me, a paradise earned through unwavering faith and uncompromising action. The mission was clear, the objective identified. It was just another operation in a long series of what we considered righteous endeavors, another step towards asserting the dominance of our truth in a world we believed was drowning in falsehood. The air in the cramped vehicle was thick with anticipation, a mixture of adrenaline and the familiar metallic scent of oiled weaponry. My heart beat a steady rhythm against my ribs, a drummer boy heralding what I believed was a noble cause. I glanced at my comrades, their faces set in grim determination, eyes reflecting the same fervent light that burned in my own. We were a unit, bound by shared ideology and the promise of eternal reward. Our target was a small outpost, a symbol of the encroaching influence we were sworn to eradicate. Intelligence suggested minimal resistance, a swift, decisive action. As we neared, the familiar tension coiled in my gut, not fear, but a heightened state of readiness, every sense alert. We moved under the cloak of pre-dawn darkness, shadows among shadows, our movements practiced, efficient. The plan was to overwhelm them quickly, to send a clear message. I recited verses silently, words of power and promise, reinforcing my resolve, steeling my spirit for what was to come. This was for God, for the establishment of His law, for the purification of the land. Every action, however harsh, was justified by the perceived sanctity of our ultimate goal. The initial breach was as planned. We moved through the outer perimeter with a silent deadliness that was the hallmark of our training. My hand was steady on my weapon, my mind focused, excluding all else but the immediate task. There was a cold, detached part of me that took over in these moments, a mechanism honed by years of indoctrination and practice. This part of me felt no remorse, no hesitation. It simply executed the will I believed to be divine. Then the unexpected. Resistance, fiercer than anticipated, erupted. The night exploded in a cacophony of gunfire, shouts, and the chilling thud of impacts. Suddenly, we were no longer the hunters, but caught in a desperate struggle. My training kicked in. I returned fire, seeking cover, barking orders, trying to regain control of a situation rapidly spiraling into chaos. A searing pain shot through my shoulder as a bullet found its mark, spinning me around. I gritted my teeth, ignoring the fire that spread through my arm, and continued to fight. Rage surged through me, a righteous fury against those who dared to oppose us, who stood against the divine will. This was not how it was supposed to be. They were supposed to be weak, easily overcome. Their resistance was an affront, a defiance that had to be crushed. I pushed forward, driven by a combination of pain, anger, and that unwavering belief in the absolute rightness of my cause. Another impact, this time in my leg, sent me sprawling. The ground rushed up to meet me, the taste of dust and blood in my mouth. My comrades were still fighting, their silhouettes stark against the muzzle flashes that lit up the darkness. I tried to push myself up, to rejoin the fray, but my limbs wouldn't obey. A strange coldness was spreading through me, a creeping numbness that was more terrifying than the pain. My vision began to blur, the sounds of battle fading into a distorted roar. Desperation clawed at me. This couldn't be the end. I had so much more to do, so much more to fight for. Paradise awaited the martyr, I reminded myself, trying to cling to the promises that had fueled my life. But, as the darkness encroiled, a flicker of something else, something I hadn't felt in years, surfaced, a tiny, terrifying seed of doubt. Was this truly the path? Was this agonizing end truly the gateway to eternal bliss? My last conscious sensation was the crushing weight of my own failing body, the roar of gunfire receding into an echoing silence, and the chilling realization that the certainty I had clung to for so long was unraveling as my lifeblood seeped into the cold, indifferent earth. Then, the blackness. A complete, utter, and terrifying cessation of everything. I was a soldier of God, or so I had fervently believed, and this was my martyr's end, the price of unwavering devotion. The blackness was absolute, a void that swallowed all light, all sound, all sensation. It was not the peaceful oblivion I might have imagined, but a suffocating emptiness, a profound sense of isolation. For a timeless moment, there was nothing but this negation of existence. Then, slowly, a new awareness dawned, not of my body, for that was gone, but of myself, a consciousness adrift. I felt a strange detachment, as if I were observing my own cessation from a distance. And then I saw it, or rather, I saw myself. Below me, in the dust and chaos of the failed mission, lay my own lifeless form, sprawled and still, a stark testament to the violence that had just occurred. My uniform was torn, stained with blood. My weapon lay useless beside my outstretched hand. It was a grotesque parody of the heroic image of the martyr I had always envisioned. There was no glory in this scene, only the grim, brutal reality of death. I should have felt triumph, or perhaps a serene acceptance, knowing I had fallen in the cause. Instead, a cold wave of confusion washed over me. This wasn't the immediate gateway to paradise I had been promised. There were no welcoming angels, no celestial choirs, only this strange, disembodied state, looking down upon the wreckage of my earthly existence. As I hovered, an unseen observer, the atmosphere around me began to change. The air, if it could be called that, grew heavy, oppressive. A chilling coldness seeped into my awareness, a coldness that had nothing to do with temperature, but with a profound spiritual desolation. From the shadows of the periphery, indistinct forms began to coalesce, shapes that writhed and twisted like smoke, yet possessed a terrifying sentience. They were dark, devoid of any light, and they radiated an aura of malice and despair that was palpable. I could feel their attention turning towards me, a predatory interest that sent a shiver of primal fear through my very essence. These were not the enemies I had fought with guns and explosives. These were something else entirely, something ancient and terrible. Whispers, faint and insidious, began to fill my consciousness, not in any language I knew, but as a direct infusion of negative emotion, accusation, mockery, despair. They seemed to be drawing on the hatred and violence that had defined so much of my life, feeding on it, amplifying it. My past actions, which I had always justified as righteous, now rose up to accuse me, not as noble deeds, but as acts of cruelty and intolerance. The faces of those I had harmed, those I had condemned, seemed to flicker in the darkness, their pain and anger directed at me. The certainty that had been my armor now felt like a crushing weight of guilt. The dark entities drew closer, their forms becoming more defined, their malevolence more intense. I felt a terrifying pull, as if they sought to drag me down into their realm of shadow and regret. I tried to resist, to call out to the God I had served, but no words came. My spiritual voice was choked by a dawning horror, the realization that the path I had so fanatically followed might have led me not to salvation, but to this. The promises of a glorious afterlife, of virgins and rivers of wine, seemed like a cruel mirage in the face of this terrifying reality. There was no beauty here, no reward, only an abyss of darkness populated by beings of pure despair. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through my confusion. Was this the true fate of a martyr? Was this the paradise earned through violence and intolerance? The thought was unbearable. The darkness pressed in, the whispers growing louder, more insistent, threatening to extinguish the last vestiges of my awareness, to absorb me into their miserable, lightless existence. I was alone, utterly alone, facing the consequences of a life lived in harsh judgment and fierce intolerance. And the God I had claimed to serve seemed impossibly distant, or perhaps had never been the entity I imagined. The despair was a living thing, coiling around me, suffocating me. Just as I felt myself succumbing, on the verge of being completely overwhelmed by the encroaching shadows and the cacophony of accusatory whispers, a change occurred. It began as the faintest glimmer, a pinpoint of light in the vast, oppressive darkness, so distant and so subtle that at first I wondered if it was merely an illusion, a desperate figment of my fading consciousness. But this light was different. It possessed a quality entirely alien to the chilling gloom that surrounded me. It was warm, impossibly warm, and it pulsed with a gentle, rhythmic beat, like a distant, loving heart. As I focused on it, the only point of reference in that terrifying void, it began to grow, slowly but steadily expanding, pushing back the oppressive shadows. The dark entities, those writhing forms of malice and despair, recoiled from its nascent radiance. They hissed and shied away, their shadowy tendrils shrinking as if burned by its purity. The menacing whispers that had tormented me began to fade, replaced by a profound, encroaching silence, a silence that was not empty, but pregnant with an indescribable peace. The light was not like any earthly light. It wasn't the harsh glare of the sun or the flickering of a flame. It was a living light, intelligent, and imbued with an emotion I could barely comprehend, an overwhelming, unconditional love. It radiated a serenity that began to seep into my very essence, calming the storm of fear and regret that had consumed me. There was an irresistible pull emanating from it, a gentle yet inexorable drawing power. Unlike the terrifying drag of the shadowy entities, this pull was not menacing. It was welcoming, inviting, like a homecoming I had never known I craved. I felt myself, my consciousness, moving towards it, or perhaps it was moving towards me, enveloping me in its ever-increasing warmth and brilliance. The darkness was receding rapidly now, dissolving like mist before the rising sun. The cold desolation was replaced by a comforting heat that soothed the raw edges of my spiritual anguish. The light became brighter, more intense, yet it didn't hurt to perceive. Instead, it felt like being bathed in pure acceptance, pure forgiveness. All the justifications, all the dogmas, all the hatred I had carried began to feel insignificant, like heavy, soiled garments I was now eager to shed. As I was drawn deeper into its embrace, a sense of awe, so profound it was almost painful, filled me. This was not the judgmental, wrathful deity I had been taught to fear and appease. This was something else entirely, something infinitely more vast, more loving, more merciful than my narrow extremist worldview could ever have conceived. The light seemed to clear my perception, stripping away layers of indoctrination and prejudice. I began to see with a dawning, heartbreaking clarity the true nature of the path I had walked, the pain I had inflicted not just on others, but on my own soul, by choosing hatred over love, division over unity. Yet, in this light, there was no condemnation, only an overwhelming sense of compassion, an invitation to understand, to heal. The journey towards the heart of this light felt like an ascent from a deep, dark pit into a realm of unimaginable beauty and truth. The fear that had gripped me was replaced by a trembling anticipation, a sense of being on the threshold of a revelation that would change everything. I didn't know what awaited me, but for the first time since my violent end, I felt a glimmer of hope, a sense that perhaps, just perhaps, redemption was possible, even for someone like me. The light was now all-encompassing, a boundless ocean of radiant love and peace, and within its heart, a figure began to take form, or rather, to emerge from the light, as if he were its very essence. He was not defined by sharp lines or physical features in the way I understood them, but his presence was undeniably, overwhelmingly real, more real than anything I had ever encountered. He was made of the light, yet distinct from it, a concentrated point of unimaginable brilliance and compassion. His form, though indistinct, radiated a majesty that was both awe-inspiring and infinitely gentle. As his presence became clearer, a name resonated in the depths of my soul, a name I had known and used, but had never truly understood: Jesus. It wasn't the Jesus of my indoctrination. A prophet, yes, but one superseded, one whose followers were misguided. This was someone else, something more. This was a being of pure, unconditional love, a love that washed over me in waves, cleansing the fear, the hatred, the ingrained prejudices from my spirit. I felt an overwhelming urge to fall, to prostrate myself, not from terror, but from a profound sense of unworthiness, and an equally profound sense of being utterly, completely, and inexplicably loved. He did not speak with words, yet his communication was perfectly clear, flowing directly into my consciousness like a river of truth. Omar, my name, spoken by him, was not an accusation, but an acknowledgement, a gentle calling. His gaze, if it could be called such, seemed to penetrate every layer of my being, seeing not just the extremist I had become, but the lost, frightened soul beneath. And then, the life review began. It was not a judgmental replay of my sins, but an experience of my entire life through his perspective, through the lens of his infinite love and wisdom. I saw myself as a child, before the harsh doctrines had taken root, full of innocence and a natural inclination towards kindness. I saw the moments when I had chosen the path of extremism, the subtle and not so subtle influences that had shaped my beliefs. I saw the faces of my teachers, their fervent conviction, and understood with a new, sorrowful clarity that they too were caught in a web of misunderstanding, passing on what they genuinely believed to be truth. I relived my actions, not just from my own viewpoint, but from the viewpoint of those affected by them. I felt the fear of those I had threatened, the pain of those I had harmed, the grief of those whose loved ones I had helped to destroy. The infidels and enemies I had so readily condemned were revealed to me as souls, just like mine, each with their own hopes, fears, and capacity for love, each a precious child of the divine. The righteous anger I had cultivated was exposed for what it truly was, a toxic brew of fear, pride, and a desperate need for certainty in a confusing world. The holy war I had waged was shown to be a grotesque perversion of faith, a betrayal of the very God I claimed to serve. The pain of this realization was excruciating, a spiritual agony far greater than any physical torment. Tears, if a spirit can weep, flowed from my very essence as I witnessed the devastation wrought by my beliefs and actions. Yet through it all, His love never wavered. It was a constant, supportive presence, allowing me to face these truths without being utterly destroyed by them. He wasn't showing me these things to condemn me, but to enlighten me, to help me understand the profound disconnect between the path of hatred I had chosen and the path of love He embodied. He showed me the moments where I had, perhaps unknowingly, acted with kindness or compassion, however small, and how these moments had shone like tiny lights in the darkness of my overall conduct. These were the actions that had resonated with His true nature, not the acts of violence or intolerance. The glorious paradise I had been promised, the one earned through martyrdom in a holy war, was revealed to be a dangerous illusion, a construct of human desire and misunderstanding. The true paradise was not a place of sensual rewards, but a state of being, a perfect union with divine love, accessible not through violence, but through a life of love, compassion, and forgiveness towards all. This understanding shattered the foundations of my entire existence. Everything I had lived for, fought for, and died for was based on a profound and tragic misinterpretation of divine will. The divine figure, Jesus, continued to guide me through the life review, His presence, a beacon of unwavering love, even as the most painful truths of my existence were laid bare. He showed me the core of my misguided faith. It was rooted in exclusivity and judgment, a belief that my group alone possessed the ultimate truth and that all others were condemned. Now, in His radiant presence, I saw this belief for what it was, an expression of profound spiritual pride, a human attempt to limit the infinite mercy and love of the Creator. He revealed that the true path to the divine was not through adherence to one narrow set of doctrines or rituals, to the exclusion of all others, but through the universal language of the heart, love, compassion, forgiveness, and service. Omar, His communication flowed into me, gentle yet unshakable. Did you not understand that I desire mercy, not sacrifice? That the greatest commandment is to love me with all your heart and to love your neighbor as yourself? And who is your neighbor? It is every soul I have created, without exception. Visions then unfolded, showing me people from all walks of life, from all faiths, from all corners of the earth, living lives of quiet love and service. They were not adhering to my specific doctrines. Many had never even heard of them, yet their spirits shone with a beautiful, gentle light because they were living in accordance with these universal divine principles. I saw how acts of kindness, no matter how small, created ripples of light in the spiritual realm, pushing back the darkness. I saw how forgiveness, freely given, healed not only the recipient but also the giver. This was a stark contrast to the harsh, judgmental ethos that had governed my life. My extremist ideology had taught me to see the world in terms of us versus them, to cultivate suspicion and hostility towards anyone who did not share our exact beliefs. Now, Jesus was showing me a reality where all were interconnected, all part of one divine family, and that the divisions we created were illusions, born of fear and ignorance. He showed me the true nature of sin, not merely the breaking of religious rules, but any thought, word, or deed that caused harm, that created separation from love, that diminished the divine spark in oneself or another. My acts of violence, committed in the name of faith, were revealed as grievous sins, not because they violated a specific code, but because they violated the fundamental law of love. The sorrow I felt was immense, a crushing weight of regret for the life I had wasted, for the pain I had inflicted, for the beautiful truth I had so tragically misunderstood. I had believed I was a soldier of God, but I had been fighting against His very nature. But why? My consciousness cried out. Why was I allowed to be so deceived? Why were we taught such things if they were so wrong? His response was filled with a profound sadness, yet also with understanding. Humanity is given free will, Omar. With that freedom comes the capacity to choose light or shadow, truth or illusion. Many who teach in my name do so with sincere hearts, yet their own understanding is clouded by human interpretation, by tradition, by fear, or by the desire for power. The pure message of love can be distorted, twisted to serve agendas that are not mine. It is the responsibility of each soul to seek me with an open heart, to listen for my true voice, which always speaks of love and unity, not hatred and division. He showed me that sacred texts, which I had revered as infallible, could indeed be sources of wisdom, but they could also be misinterpreted, used selectively to justify prejudice and violence if read without the guiding light of love and compassion. The letter of the law, he revealed, could kill the spirit if it was not animated by love. My rigid adherence to what I believed were divine commands, my meticulous observance of rituals, now seemed like a hollow pursuit, for it had been devoid of the one thing that truly mattered, a loving heart. He was not invalidating faith itself, but the distorted, hateful version of it that I had embraced. True faith, he showed me, was not a weapon to be wielded against others, but a bridge to connect with the divine and with all of humanity. It was a path of humility, of constant seeking, of opening oneself ever more fully to the transformative power of love. The divine encounter with Jesus deepened, moving beyond the life review into direct spiritual instruction, a gentle re-education of my soul. The revelations continued to dismantle the very framework of my former extremist beliefs, replacing them with truths that were at once breathtakingly simple and infinitely profound. He showed me the true nature of the divine being I had claimed to serve. This was not a tribal deity, concerned only with the welfare and dominance of one particular group, demanding strict adherence to a narrow set of laws, and condemning all others to eternal damnation. Instead, Jesus revealed a God whose love was boundless, universal, and unconditional, a creator whose mercy extended to every soul, regardless of their earthly creed, culture, or conduct. The source of all being, Omar, his communication resonated within me, is pure love. This love is the very fabric of existence. It does not discriminate, it does not judge as humans judge. It simply is, and its nature is to give, to sustain, to embrace. This was a radical departure from the judgmental, often wrathful God I had been taught to fear and appease. The idea that divine love was truly for everyone, even for those I had considered my bitterest enemies, was a concept so vast it initially struggled to find purchase in my indoctrinated mind. Jesus then addressed my deeply ingrained beliefs about an exclusive path to salvation. He showed me that while he himself embodied a perfect path to unity with the divine, the essence of that path, love, forgiveness, compassion, humility, service, could be found and expressed in many traditions, and even by those who professed no specific faith at all. It was the sincerity of the heart and the quality of one's love and actions that mattered, not the label one attached to one's beliefs. Many paths lead up the mountain, Omar, he conveyed, and though they may seem different from below, they all converge towards the same summit of divine union, which is love. Do not judge the path of another, but focus on walking your own with integrity, compassion, and an ever-expanding heart. He showed me visions of souls from diverse backgrounds, cultures, and even what I would have considered infidel religions, dwelling in realms of light and peace because their lives on earth, however imperfect, had been fundamentally oriented towards love, kindness, and truth as they understood it. This shattered my conviction that my group alone held the keys to paradise. Paradise, he revealed, was not a walled garden reserved for a select few, but a state of consciousness, a vibrational reality of love and unity that souls naturally gravitated towards as they purified their hearts and aligned themselves with divine principles. Conversely, he showed me the true nature of what might be called hell. It was not a place of arbitrary eternal torture inflicted by a vengeful God, but a state of spiritual separation, darkness, and anguish that souls created for themselves through persistent choices for hatred, cruelty, selfishness, and rejection of love. It was the natural consequence of closing one's heart to the light, a self-imposed exile. The suffering was real, but it was ultimately a suffering born of being disconnected from the source of all joy and peace. Even in these states of darkness, he showed me, divine love never abandoned any soul, always offering a path back to the light, should they choose to take it. This concept of divine justice was so different from the retributive, punitive justice I had believed in. His justice was restorative, corrective, always aimed at healing and reconciliation, not eternal condemnation. He addressed my actions directly, the violence I had committed in the name of my faith. Omar, when you inflicted pain and death upon others, believing you were serving me, you were in fact wounding me, for I reside within every soul. You were acting from a place of profound misunderstanding, fueled by fear and a distorted perception of my will. The path of violence can never lead to true peace or divine favor, for it is antithetical to my very nature, which is love. The remorse I felt was oceanic, yet his communication was not designed to crush me with guilt, but to awaken me to the truth, to guide me towards repentance, which he revealed was not merely sorrow for past wrongs, but a fundamental turning of the heart away from harmful beliefs and actions and towards love and light. He was offering me a chance to understand, to heal, and ultimately to be an instrument of his true peace, a stark contrast to the instrument of violence I had been. The intensity of these revelations was almost more than my spiritual consciousness could bear, yet with each truth, I felt a layer of my old, hardened self dissolving, making way for something new, something tender, something infinitely more aligned with the love that now enveloped me. The encounter with Jesus reached a crescendo of profound personal impartation. Having shown me the universal nature of divine love, the true path of faith, and the errors of my extremist past, he now focused on my individual soul and its future. A sense of overwhelming love, even more potent than before, washed over me, a love that felt both infinitely vast and intimately personal. It was a love that knew every flaw, every mistake, every dark corner of my heart, and yet embraced me completely, without reservation. Omar, his communication was imbued with a tender gravity. Your journey on earth took a path far from my intended way of love and unity. You were lost in a desert of harsh doctrines and a thirst for a righteousness that could not be found through exclusion and violence. But even in your deepest deviation, my love never left you. I was always calling you back, whispering to your heart, though you did not recognize my voice. I felt a profound sense of sorrow for not having heard, for having been so deafened by the rhetoric of hatred. Yet, his words were not of condemnation, but of profound understanding and a gentle calling to return. You have seen the truth now, Omar, he continued. You have experienced the reality of my unconditional love and the nature of true spiritual existence. This knowledge comes with a responsibility. My spiritual heart quaked. What could he possibly ask of me, a former extremist, a purveyor of hatred, now broken and humbled in his presence? I am calling you to return to the world you left behind, he stated, not as a harsh command, but as a loving invitation, a sacred commission. You are to be a messenger of what you have learned here. You are to tell others of my true nature, my boundless love, my desire for unity and peace among all my children. You are to warn those who are still lost in the labyrinth of hatred and division, those who, like you once did, believe they serve me through violence and intolerance. Tell them they are profoundly mistaken. The thought of returning was, in one sense, terrifying. To go back to that world of conflict, of misunderstanding, of potential persecution from my former comrades seemed an impossible task. Yet, a deeper part of me, newly awakened by his love, felt a stirring of purpose, a desire to share this life-altering truth. How, Lord? My consciousness whispered. They will not believe me. They will call me a traitor, a madman. His reassurance flowed into me like a soothing balm. You will not be alone. My spirit will be with you, will guide your words, will give you strength. Speak from the heart, from the truth you have experienced. Some will reject your message, for their hearts are hardened. But others, those whose souls are secretly yearning for something more than the harshness they have been taught, they will hear. You are to plant seeds of my true love and peace. The harvest is not your concern, that is mine. He then showed me a glimpse, not of a predetermined future, but of potential pathways, of souls I might touch, of the possibility of turning even one heart away from hatred and towards love. The impact of even a single transformed soul, he revealed, rippled outwards, contributing to the healing of the world. This is your path to true redemption, Omar, he conveyed. Not through further acts of misguided martyrdom, but through becoming an instrument of my peace, a testament to my transforming love. Your past, however dark, does not define your future, if you choose to walk in my light now. An overwhelming sense of gratitude and a profound, if daunting, sense of mission filled me. The chains of my old identity, my extremist zeal, felt as though they were finally breaking, falling away. In their place was a simple, powerful desire to serve this incredible being of light, to share his love with a world so desperately in need of it. I will go, Lord, I communicated, my entire spiritual essence resonating with this new commitment. I will do as you ask. A wave of divine approval and blessing washed over me. The light intensified, and I felt a gentle but inexorable pull, a drawing back towards the realm I had left. The last thing I felt from him was an imprinting on my soul, a constant reminder, remember my love, share my love, be my love. And with that, the radiant presence of Jesus began to recede, or rather, I began to recede from it, carrying within me a message that would redefine my existence. The return to my physical body was not a gentle awakening, but a brutal, shocking re-entry. One moment I was bathed in the ineffable love and light of Jesus, receiving his divine commission, and the next, I was slammed back into the confines of flesh, accompanied by an explosion of agonizing pain. My chest felt as if it were being ripped apart, every nerve ending screaming in protest. I gasped, a raw, desperate sound, and my eyes flew open to a world of harsh, glaring lights and frantic, masked faces. He's back! We have a pulse! The shouts were urgent, filled with a mixture of disbelief and professional urgency. I could feel hands on me, pressing, probing, the cold sting of a needle, the alien sensation of a tube being forced down my throat. The sterile, chemical smell of a hospital filled my nostrils, a stark, offensive contrast to the indescribable purity of the realm I had just left. My body was a broken thing, a prison of pain, and my first instinct was a desperate longing to return to the peace, to the love, to him. But his words echoed in the core of my being. You are to be a messenger. The physical suffering was immense. My shoulder, my leg, my chest, every wound inflicted in that final, fatal firefight now reasserted its claim with vicious intensity. Consciousness was a fragile, flickering flame, threatening to be extinguished by the overwhelming tide of pain and the potent medications being pumped into my system. Yet, through the haze of agony and morphine, the memory of the light, of his presence, of his message, remained with pristine clarity, an indelible imprint on my soul. It was this memory that anchored me, that gave me a reason to fight through the pain, to cling to this second chance at life. The doctors and nurses worked with focused intensity, their voices a low murmur of medical jargon. They spoke of miracles, of inexplicable survival against all odds. I had been without vital signs for a significant period, my injuries deemed unsurvivable. They couldn't explain it, but I knew. This wasn't just medical chance, this was divine intervention, a deliberate return for a specific purpose. My wife, Aisha, was eventually allowed to see me. Her face, when she entered the intensive care unit, was a mask of tear-streaked relief and utter exhaustion. She had been told I was gone, had begun the horrifying process of grieving, only to be called back with the news that I was impossibly alive. She rushed to my bedside, her hand trembling as she reached for mine. "Omar," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. They told me you were." I tried to speak, to reassure her, but my voice was a hoarse rasp, my throat raw. The words wouldn't come, but I squeezed her hand, hoping to convey something of the profound peace that, even amidst the physical torment, resided deep within me. The initial days and weeks were a grueling battle for physical recovery. Surgeries, infections, constant pain, the slow, frustrating process of coaxing my shattered body back towards some semblance of function. During this time, the memories of my NDE were my constant companions. I replayed every moment, every revelation, every word from Jesus, trying to absorb the immensity of what I had been shown. The contrast between the love and unity I had experienced and the hatred and division that had defined my former life was almost unbearable. The weight of my past actions, the pain I had inflicted in the name of a false god, pressed heavily upon me. How could I ever atone? Yet his message was not one of eternal condemnation, but of present transformation and future service. Your past does not define your future. If you choose to walk in my light now, those words became my mantra. When I was finally able to speak more clearly, I tried to share my experience, first with Aisha. She listened, her eyes wide, a mixture of fear, confusion, and dawning wonder on her face. She had known me as a devout, unyielding extremist. This new Omar, speaking of universal love, of a compassionate Jesus, of the errors of our shared ideology, was almost a stranger to her. She struggled to comprehend, to reconcile it with everything she had been taught, with the life we had lived. "But Omar," she would say, "our teachers, the sacred texts, they speak of holy war, of the infidels." "They were misunderstood, Aisha," I would reply, my voice still weak but firm with a newfound conviction. Or perhaps we chose to understand them in a way that justified our own fears and hatreds. The true divine message is love, only love. These conversations were difficult, often painful. Some of my former comrades, those who heard whispers of my survival and my changed state, reacted with suspicion and hostility. To them, I was a traitor, perhaps brain damaged, or worse, possessed. The path ahead, I realized, would be incredibly lonely and fraught with danger. But the memory of his love, the certainty of his truth, was a fire in my soul that could not be extinguished. I had been given a second life, and I would spend it fulfilling the mission he had entrusted to me, no matter the cost. My physical healing was a slow and arduous journey, each small improvement a victory hard won. But the spiritual and emotional healing, the process of integrating the profound truths of my near-death experience into my conscious life, was an even greater challenge. The man I had been, Omar, the fervent extremist, the soldier of a harsh and judgmental God, was dead, not just clinically for a few minutes, but spiritually. In his place was a new being, still bearing the name Omar, but animated by a radically different understanding of faith, of God, of life itself. The central burning core of this new understanding was the unconditional, universal love of Jesus. A love that embraced all, condemned none, and called humanity to a path of peace, compassion, and unity. Trying to convey this to those who had known my former self was like trying to describe color to someone born blind. Aisha, my wife, was my first and most important confidant. She listened day after day as I painstakingly recounted the details of my NDE, the darkness, the terrifying entities, the glorious all-consuming light, the loving presence of Jesus, the life review that exposed the tragic error of my ways, and the divine commission to share his true message. Her initial bewilderment slowly gave way to a hesitant curiosity, then to a dawning recognition of the profound change in me. She saw the peace in my eyes, a peace that had never been there before, even in moments of supposed religious certainty. She saw the absence of the harsh judgment, the fiery intolerance that had once defined me. This new Omar was gentler, more compassionate, filled with a sorrow for our past, and a quiet, unshakable conviction about this new truth. Her own faith, so intertwined with mine, began to be questioned, to soften. The path was not easy for her. The foundations of her world were being shaken. But my testimony, born not of intellectual argument but of undeniable, transformative experience, began to resonate with a deeper part of her own spiritual yearning. Beyond Aisha, the reactions were, as Jesus had forewarned, mixed. When word of my survival and my changed views reached my former associates in the extremist movement, the response was swift and predictable. Condemnation, accusations of heresy, betrayal, madness. Threats were made. I became an apostate in their eyes, a dangerous pariah. This was painful, for these had been my brothers in arms, men with whom I had shared a powerful, if misguided, bond. Yet the fear that might once have paralyzed me was now overshadowed by the certainty of his love and the urgency of his message. I also sought out individuals from the very groups I had once condemned, followers of other faiths, or even those with no faith at all. I approached them with humility, not as a preacher, but as a penitent, a witness. I told my story, not to convert them to a new religion, but to share the universal truths of love, forgiveness, and interconnectedness that Jesus had revealed. Some listened with skepticism, others with polite indifference, but some, a precious few, listened with open hearts. They saw the sincerity in my eyes, heard the ring of truth in my voice, and were touched by the message of a love that transcended religious boundaries. These encounters, though often challenging, were profoundly healing for me. Each act of reaching out in love, of seeking understanding rather than imposing belief, was a step away from my former self, a step closer to the man Jesus was calling me to be. I began to study sacred texts, not just my own, but those of other traditions, no longer with the aim of finding fault or proving their inferiority, but with a new desire to find the common threads of divine wisdom, the echoes of the universal love he had shown me. And I found them, hidden beneath layers of dogma and cultural interpretation. The same essential truths resonated: love God, love your neighbor, live with compassion, seek peace. My mission was not to create a new religion or to condemn old ones, but to call people back to the heart of all true spirituality, the transformative power of love. It was a message that transcended labels, that spoke to the deepest needs of the human soul. The loneliness was, at times, profound. I was a man without a tribe, an outcast from my old world, not yet fully integrated into any new one. But in those moments of isolation, I would recall his promise, "I will be with you." And in quiet prayer, in moments of deep reflection, I would feel his presence, a comforting warmth, a gentle reassurance, a renewed strength to continue the work he had given me. My new life was taking shape, a life dedicated not to holy war, but to holy peace, a peace that begins in the heart of each individual.